Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and today we're going to be talking about Rayman Origins. So this is a game that when I originally played it was back on the Wii, back when it came out then. And this particular time I played it on PC, and you know I'm a big fan of 2D platformers. I've kind of grown up; they're like my jam, if you will. And it's been a while since I played this one. Like played it properly anyway. And my original experience of this game was I actually bought it because one thing the Wii was really good at was 4-player like platformers and like the multiplayer. And I remember having an absolute blast because the game was essentially like lets you play it 4-player, and on top of that it was like you could punch your friends and dumb stuff would ensue. It was just a very, very silly game. But this time I've been playing through it pretty much on my own, and just enjoying the game as is. Now, I think this game is quite overlooked because Rayman Legends exists, which is the sequel, which came out on Wii U and Xbox 360 and all that good stuff. And it was a game that when the Legends is fantastic. Legends is such a good game. It has a ton of like everything that this game does, like Legends pretty much like improved on. But that shouldn't be like testament to this game. This game is actually still really good, and replaying it, it's really hard for me to sit here and pick this game apart, like in terms of like negative points about it. There are some things that are a bit like but for the most part, this is a really solid game. And replaying it and getting through a bunch of the levels and seeing how the level design and all this other good stuff, which we're going to get to in a sec, really surprised me. And I was like, wow, this game's actually really good. And I gotta say, like, for a game that came out back on the Wii, when the Wii had like, you know, Mario and Donkey Kong and all this sort of stuff, this is up there in terms of those platformers. You know, same with things like with Wario Land that was on the Wii as well. There's a lot of really good 2D platformers on that console. And obviously this isn't the Wii, this is the PC version. But for the time that it came out, like, that was a really good time. It was like a sort of renaissance for 2D platformers, and this is just, this is a really solid game. So let's talk about it. First things first, with any kind of platformer like this, you need tight controls, ones that feel responsive, as this game has plenty of levels that require you to move very, very fast. And the controls in this game, 99% of the time, absolutely perfect. There are a couple of issues, but we'll come to that later on. But in terms of running, jumping, attacking, moving around in the levels, moving around in the air, all the things that you get, the powers that you get that add to your movement abilities and things like that, this game feels really, really fun to play. Very, like I said, very tight controls. You have a fairly decent hitbox because there are levels where you have to use your helicopter hair and stuff and move around, and you have to like fly between tight spaces, so that's always interesting. But I can't fault the controls of this. This game plays like a dream. Like, honestly, once you kind of understand the levels, and I do believe later on you can do like I think when you replay certain levels you can do a time trial style thing. Once you learn the levels, once you learn how the movement works, you can blitz levels, and it feels so good to do that, just from running from right to left or however. And it also, and because the controls are so good, and because the controls work, like I said, 99% of the time, it means that the level design can be crazy, which it does become later on. But like the level design has to also be very, very well put together. And that's one thing that this game marries very well, is the controls and the tightness of those controls and how responsive they are, and the level design that you get. Now, there are kind of like what I would call, there's more than this, but there are two types of like your standard platforming levels, because there's also levels where you ride the Mosquito. So let's just remove them for a minute. You get two types of standard platform levels. You kind of get the ones that are very fast moving and fast paced, and and you can kind of run through them and find secrets as you're going. And then you've got the more precision platforming, we'll say, kind of levels that have you ducking and weaving between spikes, and you're not running as fast and all that kind of stuff. For the most part, the level design is ideal. If you take the first world, Gibberish Jungle, a lot of these levels are quite quick. It's a lot about bouncing on enemies' heads. It's a lot about jumping around, lots of wall jumps, things like that. And that's kind of more of what you'd expect for a fast-paced, sort of traditional kind of 2D platformer. And then you've got other levels later on, like things like Desert of Didgeridoos, which is the second world, and also Sea of Serendipity, or whatever it's called, which is the swimming one. Bit slower in some aspects. Didgeridoo, the desert world is more like the first world, but there is levels where you kind of have to use your hair glide a lot to like maneuver and things, so it kind of like has this mix of levels. But this game adds each world you get a new power. So you've got run up walls is one of them. You've got the ability to glide with your hair. You've got the ability to swim. They're very basic powers, but they open up a lot of different level types, level design, things like that. And then you can go back to other levels, and then there's even more levels that open up later on. The one interesting thing with this game, where they remade, they were like, this was the reboot of the franchise, was that Rayman's attacks are kind of nuts. You obviously have the punch. Takes a little while to spin up a big one, but you can punch up, down, left, right, slap the ground, dive bomb. Like, Rayman's moveset in terms of how he moves and his attacks, there's a lot there. It's actually like they're giving him quite a lot of kit. And the same with Glowbox and the Teensies when you play them as well. They've got a lot of moves and things. Like one thing I found out that I didn't even realise you could do is you can jump, hold down, or dive bomb. You can then slide, roll into a slide and things. You can slide down hills and stuff. It's there's just a ton of movement options, and because wall jumps there by default, and it's easy to do. It's really that's part of what makes the level design and the controls work so well. Is that having those options. Once you start to learn what you can and can't do, you can really abuse it. You can really schmooze through the levels, if you like, move through them at a nice speed, and it just genuinely feels like there's a lot of time and care was put into this. Obviously, you can play the levels at your own pace. There's a lot of exploration to do. You've got to find cages to get the Teensies, not Teensies, the Lums, I think it is. I don't know. You think the little the little circular things you have to save. But you can kind of do it at your own pace, and each world kind of adds new challenges to that as you go along. So I was talking about like the level design. One thing that I think is interesting with this game, and really helps the player, especially on the more difficult levels, is each level is almost there's like a bunch of sections. And what I mean by that is that when you start a section, when you start the level, you'll do whatever the challenge is, and there's these doors, these like eyeball doors that you can smack and you run through. That acts as a checkpoint, and each one is set up into multiple sections. Some levels have a lot of sections. The swimming levels less so, but what this means is there's a lot more checkpoints, a lot more regular checkpoints. There is the game gets you back in fairly quick when you die. There are no lives in this game, right? You can take up to 2 hits as well, because the way the game works, it's a lot more about dodging things. Like, you can attack a lot of stuff, and you have got a lot of kit in your arsenal to deal with. But you get like a heart that you can pick up that will follow you around, that will count as 1 hit. But you essentially have these sections of levels, which means that as long as you get through a section, you don't have to worry about it. It's done. And sometimes you can go back through those doors if you've missed stuff. But basically, it always checkpoints you at these doors. So there's regular checkpoints. There's no lives. So when you're doing the mosquito levels, I think there are checkpoints in those. I think. Could be wrong. I haven't died on one in a while. Same with the swimming ones. I think there are actual checkpoints there that are just baked in. Because normally you have to go for a door, that kind of checkpoints. The other time it usually happens is when there are 2 secret rooms, essentially, on every level, or most levels, where you have to do a quick challenge to free some of the guys in the cages. And that'll also act as a checkpoint. So there's a lot of ability there to keep the player going. Like, don't get me wrong, this game can be quite tough at points, but for the most part you're never too far away from wherever you die. It's usually like the start of a room or something like that. I do think this was actually improved upon in the sequel, because then you get way more regular checkpoints, but that's nothing to do with this game. But ultimately, the way the levels are designed into sections and into chunks, I think that works really well in its favour. It keeps things moving quickly. And that's the good thing with this game, is like I said, you can play it very quickly. There's a lot of exploration to be done. If you're trying to get a ton of like points, or I think it's the lums that you collect that give you points to, like, maximise all the rewards at the end of the level. There's plenty of things to find. There's stuff hidden behind, like just out of sight. There's all these secret rooms. They do a good job, and something I really appreciate is when there's a secret room, you hear the little voice going, help me, like that. And that is a fantastic indicator to be like, okay, it's in this area. It doesn't tell you exactly where it is, it just goes, it's in this area. And I'm very thankful for that, because it's, if you're trying to collect the cages, which add up to unlocking more characters, unlocking extra levels, things like that, it's nice being able to find 3 of them you know, for having 3 points per level basically. And yeah, it's just a really nice sort of quality of life, being like, hey, it's in this area. I'm not going to tell you where it is, but it's in this area. And once you sort of figure out how the game works, you look for cracks, you look for like foliage covering the front of the screen, stuff like that, where you can find these secrets. So it's really cool like that. So all in all, I think the level design for the most part is really, really good. You do have the shmup levels where you play it on the Mosquito, which is a really nice callback. These are actually pretty fun. I sometimes think they're a little bit long for what they are, but overall I actually think these are a nice break. They're not. There's one world that doesn't have one, I think, but pretty much every world has one of these. They're fun. It handles well. It's a nice distraction from the regular platforming. Yeah, so level design for the most part really, really cool. In terms of, I should talk about the worlds actually, because the worlds themselves are really interesting, and it's not your typical, like, I guess what you'd expect from a platform. It's not like a typical Mario game. So you start off in Gibberish Jungle, which has, and I will bring up the music as well. The music in this game is fucking great. It's ridiculous, it's boppy, it's very silly, but it's also a really good soundtrack, and there's some absolute bangers in this. But Gibberish Jungle is your sort of standard place. It's all jungle. This game has a lot of callbacks to the first Rayman game, right? This is meant to be callback. Like, some of the platforms look like they're straight out of that game. You've got like the mushroom dudes. So this world is very much, like I said, quite quick. A lot of swinging, jumping, all that sort of thing. Nice world to get you into it. Second world, Desert of Didgeridoos, is a music-based world, very much reminiscent of Bandland. I love it. I think anything that's musical stuff where you're running around on things and making noises and bouncing off drums and all this other stuff, I think that is so well designed, that world. Looks great, sounds great, awesome. After that you have Gourmet Land, which I think is one of the biggest like changes between worlds I've ever seen. So when you get there, it's like all icy, you're on top, it's all like meant to be like drinks and juice and oranges and things like that, where it's like, hey, it's an ice world, nobody likes ice worlds. But and then halfway through the world it just changes, and you suddenly go boom, and you drop down underneath all the ice. Suddenly you're in a lava-filled kitchen kind of thing, and you've got Mexican-style Day of the Dead music playing, and it's just absolutely bonkers. Like, it's crazy. It's probably one of the best world designs I've ever seen in the game, if I'm honest. Like, I think it's just so like clever, but an absolute nut. And then after that you have the, like I said, Sea of Serendipity, I think is what it's called, which probably my least favourite world because swimming, whatnot, but it's very creepy. The music in that world is bizarre, but like, you know, it has a decent mix of levels. There's like one called like Port Panic or something, where you're like running along a port and trying to avoid stuff, but very, very beautiful designed world. And then sort of the final world before you go up to like the final, I say final area, is like this mountainous area, and you're like running around the walls and jumping off things and going inside of monasteries and things. It's honestly, it's very refreshing, the level design in this game, in terms of how those worlds look and how those levels feel. And once you kind of go, because I never fully finished this game, but what you kind of do is you kind of go around the map, you go to each world, and then you have to go back to each world and do like these spin-off worlds of each one. So it's what, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I think 4 more worlds open up, and they're set off like the other worlds. And you go to each one, and then you go back to them to unlock these, get these relics or whatever it is. And they add like more complicated levels, but the actual designs and things of these worlds is fantastic. They all feel very different. They all look really good, and honestly, it's just like it's very refreshing. It's the one downside to Mario games, they kind of play a bit too safe, whereas this feels very different like that. And I'm all for it. Like I said, Gourmet Land, awesome. Same with Desert of Didgeridoos, awesome. Yeah, the animation. Let's talk about the animation. This UV art, when they used it on this game in Legends, oh my god. The animation frames on the way Rayman and Glowbox and the other characters move and look, and like if you hold down the run button on the spot, Rayman starts running on the spot with his tongue out looking like a crazed madman, and then he like shoots forward. Like his jump into, when you want to duck, if you jump and hold down, he'll like do into a dive, then into a roll, then into a slide. Like the animations on the characters are flipping awesome. Like honestly, like I'm just super impressed by the way this game, it already has a really nice art style, but the actual animation quality on so many of the characters, even the enemies, like the mushroom guys with this, they've got these like sticks. You get closer and they start spinning around them and doing all these crazy animations. It's like wow, if you actually stop and look at the enemies and see how they're animated, and look at your yourself, and Glowbox is just awesomely animated as well. The Teensies too. It's just mind-blowing how good, like, this game is going to look good in like 50, 60, 70, 80 years time, right? It's just going to look that good. Honestly, it's so like, mwah, it's beautiful. So all in all, this game looks the part, plays the part, has like really interesting level design, has really interesting level locales. There's not much that I honestly feel about this game that's negative. I genuinely really like this game. I think this game, if you've not played this game and you like platformers, this is like, put this high on the list. This is a very, very, very good experience. There are, however, a couple of minor things I do want to bring up because they do just kind of, they're just there. The first one, I said the controls 99% of the time are absolutely perfect, and they are. There are a couple of times, and this might just be the PC version, I don't know, where my control inputs have been eaten, where I'll be like trying to do a wall jump and it'll just drop, or I'll try and do helicopter hair and it just won't work. And I'm not sure what triggers it. It usually happens when I jump off screen, or like I'm doing something very fast. That's usually when it comes into it. And for the most part, not an issue. The only times it's really been an issue is on one of the levels that caused me to keep falling down the same hole. I don't know why. It was just I couldn't make this jump because the helicopter hair wouldn't activate. And other than that, it's mainly when I'm trying to, like, I've done like a bit of wall jumping and trying to, like, sometimes when you like grab a vine and try and wall jump at the same time, the game doesn't quite know what to do. So I think there's just a couple of like minor issues with it, with the controls, but these are very, very few and far between, and these are very specific circumstances that I found. They are frustrating when it happens, but I can't fault the controls the rest of the time. They're basically perfect. So the other thing that I'm not a big fan of in this game is the treasure levels and any of the chase sequences in this game in general. So when you find the fairies, they're in like they're being held in these things' mouths. You have to like run after them, and also the treasure levels, you have to do a bunch of those, race after these treasure chests. These levels and those sequences, the reason why I don't really enjoy them is that because it's that trial and error where sometimes it feels very much like you have no chance of succeeding at, especially the treasure levels. They are specifically hard. Don't get me wrong, they are hard. They're meant to be hard. They unlock a bonus world or whatever they unlock, because I never actually ended up doing it later on in the game. But just doing the first one, I was like, oh my god, this feels like busy work. I really don't enjoy this, because if you make one or two mistakes, that's it, it's game over, you start again. There are no checkpoints on those levels, you have to do them in one go. And I get it, like, when you nail it, it does feel good, but they also just sometimes, it's like, I tried to be clever about it, but like, oh, there's slopes, I'll slide down them, and it just messes up my jumps, and yeah, not my favourite, not really a fan of those. You know, I'll probably leave them until the end and try and do them all in one go, you know, get really annoyed. But they're not great. Luckily, they're kind of like, they're just there if you want to do the bonus world. So like, if you want the extra content, you kind of have to do them. But if you just want to enjoy the main game, you can just ignore them. And like I said, the chase sequences when you're chasing after the fairies, they're not awful. It's just they're not the part of the game that really stands out. You know, it's okay when, like, if you're doing levels and bits of the scenery are falling away, or you're being chased by stuff in a level. It's just the reason why these bits are so difficult is the camera's constantly moving and shifting because it's following the object that you're chasing, which means that you are kind of on that timer rather than being like the camera's focused on you, and you're like, if things are happening around you, you're always center pretty much. You can deal with it yourself. There's a rush, but not to the same level. It's just when you make a mistake there, you can usually rectify it. You have a chance to rectify it, whereas these other levels you don't. You pretty much need to start that sequence again. But that is it. Like, I don't really have anything else to say bad about this game. I think this game is genuinely one of the best platformers I've ever played. It's up there. Like, you know, people are always going to, you know, cite a lot of Mario games. They're going to cite, like, Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze and things like that. But I think this deserves to be up alongside them. Yeah, alright, Legends probably is a better game. Legends also contains a ton of Origins levels, if not all of them. And it's, you know, we'll get to that at some point. But if you are somebody that is looking to play a new platformer or a fun multiplayer game, this is a really, really good investment. You're going to have a great time with it. The game looks great. It feels great to play. And overall, just Modern Rayman is some of my favourite. I'd much prefer these newer games over the older ones. It's not that the old ones are bad. I just like the way these ones handle and control and look. You know, it's been a while since we've had one from After Legends, but regardless, Origins is a really, really good pickup, and I would recommend it to anybody looking for a platformer game to play. Anyway, thank you very much for watching and listening to this video today. If you like the video, hit like. If you want to see more content, then hit subscribe. Links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below in the description as always. And until next video, I will see you then.